You hate them, huh?
You know, you try and do a job. Do you get any gratitude? Do you get any sense that they appreciate what you... No.
I'm talking about the glasses.
Oh. They're okay, but this is definitely easier.
They're upgraded.
Are they?
Yeah.
Really?
You can get actual intel on the humans in real time now.
I'm going to do what you do.
I can't even get it in the... Okay, there it is.
Now you're going to get some of my gel on them.
Yeah, anyways. So apparently, like, they have this whole thing where they feel like certain people can't style their hair in a particular way because it's, like, really bad for other humans and stuff. That's something I'm learning right now. This
whole flesh adornment thing, it gets them really uptight.
Yeah.
Super uptight. I wonder if that's actually back to the monkey past. You know, there are... I can't remember which... Maybe it was there's a type of monkey that when it becomes the alpha male of the pack and it has sexual access to all the other females, it grows a little Mohican. It's like it genetically knows it's the alpha. And then if it gets dethroned, the little Mohican...
What?
Yeah, that's real, man. That's real.
Their hair stands up?
Their hair stands up. They get a Mohican.
Oh, that happens to me just down there.
When you know that you're the alpha?
Well, I'm in my flesh vehicle.
I see.
Like nowadays, you just float around as a ball of light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
just give me that. You don't even need that anymore. You know what?
It's not even my thing, man.
You just say you don't like it, man. Anyways, but yeah, it's like, for example, like if one tribe wears these, right, and then another tribe is like, oh, that looks really nice. I'll just try it.
Yep.
The other tribe gets really furious.
Is this because of, like, you know, we got to pontificate on something. We got to give a content for the report. Is this because the identity thing? Because the sense of identity is weak, so they start clinging to identity symbols. Like, I have the wraparound glasses. You can't have them. They're... What was that?
Timeline shutters.
I hate that. So, yeah, there's this thing, isn't there, that if the identity is low, they're going to get stuck on, like, the little identity symbols and be like, no, you can't have that because that's my thing. What was the adornment that you did that was not your thing that you weren't allowed to do? What boundary did you transgress?
Well, okay, let's see. What timeline was I in? I was a little bit further ahead, but it was actually these things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was considered a crime?
The eye shields.
Ah.
I don't know. I mean, before it might have been hair, but it might have been certain pieces of cloth, but nowadays it's eye shields.
Okay.
Because during the, what's it called? What's that age called where the cyberkinetic implementations on a human body, you know, like Elon Musk came out with the Neuralink, and then we started wearing like...
Oh, so that they could see all the data about the people around them.
The interfaces, right?
The interface, yeah.
Yeah. Then one tribe really started adopting it, and then the other ones were like...
They're rejected, sure.
Oh, shit, like this was my thing, you know? Because they have different frames, too. This one's the singular minimal version, and then they have ones like, you know, the Kanye West shutter shades thing, where you can, there's like lines and stuff. So you have another tribe with that.
Okay.
Some people from that tribe decided to adopt these.
Okay.
And then like the ones with the minimal eye shades are like,
Isn't that funny? You would invest your identity in something that you can change inside of like an hour or like a couple of hours.
Yeah, and you know, to go to what you're saying about identity being low, I'm almost convinced, like, what if it's not even identity being low, but that's just how these humans find their identity?
Through conflict?
Through conflict, yes, definitely, but also symbols, just really simple imagery.
Right.
And I don't know if there's going to be a time period where they just completely remove themselves of it.
I know that within certain criminal organizations that use the two-wheel vehicles, if you wear the wrong overcoat, jacket, you can be killed for that. They kill you if you wear the wrong colors on your jacket in the wrong area.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this philosopher back in the human timeline, 1990s. His name was Tupac Shakur.
Familiar.
Tupac Shakur. Around that time, in this area of South Central Los Angeles, there was a lot of gang warfare. So one team would wear red, and the other ones would be wearing blue.
It's nice primary colors.
Yeah, and if you walk in these neighborhoods that are red shirt owned, wearing a blue shirt, they would literally slaughter that person.
I wonder what the origins were of that. Who decided
This has always been a thing, though. This is just
Sure.
one that I was really fascinated with because the music that came out around this time was fucking amazing, man. It's really, really good. But I mean, back in the day, I'm sure people got slaughtered for other things too. Then they were like powdered wigs or something. I don't know.
Oh yes, there was the powdered wigs and the stocking people, and they would wear red coats, and they would also get slaughtered if they went into the wrong lands as well. It's interesting, isn't it, how these archetypal symbols come up again and again, and it's all rooted in dominance hierarchies and symbols. But though you and I were never particularly into it in our manifestation, some people really enjoyed conflict. They really, really got a buzz and an excitement and a high from conflict and violence. Again, it's one of these little human software faults that kind of needs to be overridden at some point.
Yeah, I mean, in your flesh suit, you were like in front of these like nightclub things, and you were like,
oh yes,
No.
It's actually not true to say I didn't go through a cycle where I did enjoy conflict. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I did go through a cycle.
So
of
did I,
conflict.
definitely.
Yeah. So my role at that time that they offered me money for, coconuts for, was to watch great numbers of them imbibe the liquid alcohol and alter their states, and it made them lustful and violent and sometimes angry. And my job would be to stop them from murdering each other. Well, we weren't allowed to use weapons. We had to use our bare hands.
Why would you do that to yourself?
It was, I think I was becoming addicted to adrenaline and neuroepinephrine through the conflict and the risk. The risk was...
The flesh chemicals that felt...
The flesh chemicals.
You probably that could have got from dance, but you decided to get it through
I
there.
didn't know at that time. I hadn't learned to use the flesh suit properly. I was using it very poorly at that time. So I subsided on violence and coca leaves that had been reduced down into a refined powder, and then you shoot it up your nostrils. It goes into your brain. Mainly an anesthetic, but also produces some of these stimulatory effects. Very invigorating.
I might have like seen that or at least smelt it a few times.
It
but I
has a
don't really
very,
know.
very noticeable smell, yeah.
I see. So it's so almost as if like these natural chemicals that would manifest from these situations you were addicted to, no matter how poisonous they might be.
Oh, yes.
I definitely had my situations with that as well. My conflict was in the realm of flipping, human body parts and human body parts. One has a decent sized geometric shape in terms of the whole overall silhouette, and you're like, let's talk. And then you move your mouth noises, and then eventually the mouth noises turn into mouth on body part, and then you do this thing.
Yes, yes.
But man, it was just a goddamn headache by the end of it. In the same way, I'm sure in your case, fighting a bunch of belligerent, drunk, they say, humans just trying to fight.
Yeah, it became a part of my identity. I enjoyed the kinship with the people who were also doing the same job that I was, and something about risk and violence, and perhaps even some creative expression there. I was doing a lot of martial arts at the time, so I was training for using the flesh suit in a way that was combative.
Well, we did get manifested in the vehicle that had a bit more testosterone, right?
It
Yours
seems so.
probably more than mine, I think. A lot more.
Perhaps.
And would you say that was a big indicator of the lifestyle that you chose?
It's a wonderful debate ongoing, whether it's chicken or egg. Do you become violent because you have more testosterone, or more sexually active because you have more testosterone, or do you develop more testosterone because you're more violent or more sexually active? There certainly seems to be something cyclical.
Yeah. Which is
Circular.
What's interesting is that in
Cyclical, I'm sorry.
I can't even do it. I don't have human tongue right now. I can't pronounce that. So the thing is, like, during my time of my manifestation on Earth was right at the beginning of the transitory period where technology was really starting to integrate. I lived a life where I got to see humanity without that much technology interference. And then the second half was completely integrated in every single way. There was this one thing that was happening for a while too, which was like, people were shaming certain bodies for having more testosterone or even more estrogen, but there was this big fight against having more testosterone. And in my case, I was almost a bit confused because it was like, as somebody with more testosterone, am I supposed to behave a certain way? And if I behave this way, is it a good or bad thing? Is it a bad thing? I guess it's a bad thing. So I have to be ashamed of my own testosterone. And we talked about shame before. So I started floating in this soup of ambiguity as a human being, when really I'm just actually a floating avatar in the parallel dimension that really didn't want to associate with my flesh vehicle in the first place. You feel me?
I feel you, sir. I went through and chose to manifest 15 years before you, right before that transitory phase really got more vicious. And so during the period of the 1980s, it was still okay. I was still a very small entity at that time, but I could see testosterone being rewarded. It was there in the pop culture. A lot of the films featured very testosterone-y looking men doing very testosterone-y things, and that was okay. And I was like, oh, I look forward to being a grown male when I can too enjoy these things. But by the time I got to that age, it was already a taboo.
Very strange. And overall, testosterone is one thing that you might be born with a bit more of. And then there's this other thing. People are really obsessed with the amount of melanin in the flesh too. A lot of this melanin has been the source of a lot of conflicts within humanity for thousands of years. They're really obsessed with this. I mean, people are arguing over the eye shields now, but this is a cyberkinetic enhancement. You can still remove it, but like just because you were born with a certain response to the sun, people are literally shooting each other, and they are really angry with other people that might have difference in melanin.
I won't put this in the report, but one thing I have reflected on personally is if one of the issues with humanity is we're very, when we're in the flesh suit, very focused on the visual system, the visual sensory system.
Yeah.
So we're taking in a lot of visual data, and it's because it's so immediately important to the flesh suit. You need to be able to see if there's predators, if there's sharp objects. So it's immediately important, and it works very quickly, the visual system. And so maybe humanity overemphasizes it. And because it overemphasizes it, it's very into look. It's like, if you look this way, it must be very important data about you. And I always thought, maybe it's not that important. Maybe that data could be very misleading. You might look like a violent thug, but actually you enjoy poetry and clipping bonsai trees in your spare time. And maybe I should wait and gather more data about the entity in front of me instead of just looking at the visual cues. If you shave your head and wear a hoodie, then you might be seen one way, and if you wear a suit, you're seen another way. But criminals wear suits, and sometimes kind people shave their heads and wear hoodies.
One thing that I'm piecing together right now from this conversation up here in the flip ship is that, so you're saying that a lot of the humans respond to visual cues in order to spot danger. Over-respond because of searching for visual danger. There's a lion over there. There's a safari animal. That,
a cliff.
A cliff that they might fall off and cut their head off accidentally on a branch. So it's almost as if the mechanisms that humans look for instinctually is to consistently look for conflict and danger in order for their own survival.
Interesting. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that now, and perhaps that is the root of all of the division that's currently happening in that timeline. We haven't evolved past that initiatory, I see you, and my survival mechanisms are searching hard for some sort of danger in order to keep my primitive flesh suit alive. Even though we're past that. We're completely past that initial danger, maybe in some other places around the world and stuff. But currently in the technological, what they say, the developed first world, we don't need to overemphasize the search for visual danger as much as we did hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago.
Yes, because to be fair to humanity, a stranger could herald an army coming, or a rival tribe to kill everybody and rape the women, or they could bring disease. So strangers really were dangerous. And how would you know they were a stranger? Well, the visual appearance, maybe the clothing, the robes, the hat, or as you said, the amount of melanin in the skin, the structure of the face. They could be bringing spices and medicine and science, but humans, based on the environment in which they've evolved, have to prioritize the negative over the positive. They have to prioritize negative over positive, and they have to be forgiven for that, because danger is more of an immediate threat to the continuation of the species than reward would be a boon to the continuation of the species. It's more important to know there's a tiger over here that will kill you than it is to know there's berries over there that will sustain you. Even though they're equally important in the long term, immediately, right now, that's the more I must run from this tiger before I go and eat those delicious berries.
Now that we've teleported out here in the flip ship, it makes a bit more sense. But while you're in it, I was always so frustrated in the fact that humans would generally focus on negative things, including myself. You were that person on YouTube like me, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the comment section.
Oh, good Lord.
Could you imagine if we uploaded this on YouTube and we had people replying to us right now? Thank God we're not filming this.
No, let's never do that. Or release it if we do.
Jesus Christ. Just some of these comments, man. They're purposely antagonizing. They're not trying to have a discussion. They're angry just to set you off. And for some reason, during my stint as some drama commentator, because that's the only thing humans care about, really, I would read 30 comments that are positive. Pierre, you were absolutely amazing at this. I love how you talk about this. This is great. This is great. Ego's like, yay. And then one comment. You're a pseudo-intellectual piece of shit, narcissist, idiot. And then I'm thinking about it. I'm all like chemicals, the adrenaline's coming out. I'm like, getting in a fight with somebody, but I'm just angrily typing, and then I delete the comment, and then I don't even post it.
Even though the data is 30 to 1.
Yes.
Or more, 60 to 1.
And you just focus on that terrible, shitty comment that you know is false.
That's, again, an evolutionary... It's not an evolutionary flaw, but it's evolutionary weight that has to be carried. We can forgive it. We see where it comes from, but it really holds people back. And the more people interact in that way, the more it seems we lose faith in each other and trust in each other. It seems like at the point of the split in humanity, their faith in humanity was at its lowest. Their trust in humanity. So I don't trust myself, and I don't trust you, and I don't trust anybody else. You can't have a species working together towards a common goal if they've lost faith in each other.
So what you're implying could be we're reverting back to primitive instinctual reactions because we have lost our faith with each other, which eventually leads the humans to consistently look for danger in others. In this case, it's visually. And the distrust has grown so much that we're almost, as advanced as they might be, they're actually reacting very primitively.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I would add to the point about the period of the split that identity was very, very weak and self-loathing was very high. Shame was very, very high. Self-loathing will always manifest. I know this because of the flesh suit manifestation focusing on mental health. Self-loathing will always manifest as a loathing for others. So if you hate yourself and you're ashamed of yourself, you'll have contempt for other people because there's no... The boundary between inside and outside amongst humans is quite weak. It's a very, very thin boundary. It's maybe one of the prescriptive things that people could develop is a stronger boundary between my emotions and how I feel and how the world looks. Because if I'm angry, the world looks angry. If I'm sad, the world looks sad. If I'm happy, the world looks great. That's kind of a little, if not a fault, it's a factor.
That's, at the same time, that same dissolution of boundary is also what makes the species slightly magical. Because, for example, if you go to a music festival and you dance to a song and everybody's singing the same lyrics, there's this thing that, like, they call them karaoke. I don't know why they're obsessed with this song. You know, it's like, Sweet Caroline, da-da-da-da. It's not really my thing, but I can appreciate the fact that an entire group of people are almost boundaryless, enjoying the same emotional ecstasy in that very moment. So at the same time, it's terrible when these humans are projecting negative emotions with each other, but at the same time, they're able to celebrate these things that, you know, us up here can't exactly do.
Yes. So the dissolution of boundaries can be dangerous and it can lead to trouble, but it can also lead to good things. It can lead to unity as well. It seems like a lot of the things that we're mentioning, they have positive and negative manifestations, but they have to be directed with intent and discipline towards the positive. Otherwise, left to their own devices, they tend to go negative.
They don't really want to get better, do they?
I can't put that in the report, but it does feel a bit like the will to improve and the will to evolve is weak. But that's probably as a result of years of shame and identity attacks.
Do they like suffering? They actually look for things to produce that feeling of suffering. They're addicted to the sensation. I don't know if it's just because they're still primitive apes that just have a thirst for war and blood, and it's still within their wiring. But oftentimes, if you try to take that suffering away from another human being, or if that human being themselves want to get rid of it, they actually don't, and they find other ways to impose that same feeling of terror and suffering in their lives.
It's maybe because it's so critical in evolutionary terms to look at what hurts, we can mistake that for something that's important. So that which creates suffering seems to be important.
Yes.
And then the identity is built around suffering. And you hear them speak in these terms. I suffered this. That's important. And you can't tell me it's not. There's even arguments of who suffered the most.
Yeah.
And they beat their sort of sticks of suffering against each other to see which one is larger and thicker. Perverts.
It's sickos, man. You know how they like play, like they toss a ball back and forth. Sometimes they literally will shove each other and hurt each other over a ball to get this ball into a hoop. It's almost like this type of competition with the amount of suffering that they have nowadays.
Yes, there is something athletic and sport-like about that. Yeah, they have these games that they play competitively. Yeah. So there's a competition to see who has suffered most.
I have an idea. What if, like, so for example, back in the day when they were Neanderthals?
Yeah, Neanderthals
like
or
monkey
Neanderthals.
Hybrid things?
They'd been accelerated a few times, yeah.
Before the extraterrestrials, Anunnaki came down and spread their seed and with the psilocybin mushroom edition, and they advanced way too quickly over a short amount of time. Before that?
That upgrade was brutal, but yes, before that.
Okay, so we're kind of doing the same thing with technology now, though. Okay, anyways. So what I'm thinking, right, is like when they were hunting, they would suffer in order to capture the gazelle, right? They're suffering, they're running, they're trying to, and then maybe there's a lion there too, and they're like, oh shit, we gotta fight this one off, we gotta get the thing, and we gotta cut it open, we gotta bring it back, lug it 10 million kilometers back to the tribe, and then, keep the tribe alive. So inherently, for that chase, they were suffering. So now suffering becomes synonymous with the reward of the gazelle to eat. So intrinsically, through years of that, perhaps our brains convinced ourselves, hey, suffering is actually meaning, it's purpose, and important because it provided you a meal tonight from that hunt.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. That would suggest there's almost like a species memory developed over hundreds of thousands of years, that there is no reward without suffering. And if we get rewards without suffering for them, perhaps it creates anxiety or a sense of unreality, or it's actually not that satisfying. You get your reward without suffering and it just doesn't feel like good.
Right. And then you crave that hunt, the journey, the pain, the purpose. Because technically, suffering is meaning and suffering is purpose, but it used to be synonymous with actual survival and gathering what would make you survive. But now, because we don't have that chase, perhaps the purpose, we just tie it directly into suffering for the sake of suffering only, with no reward.
There's definitely, so to add nuance to what you said, if you're on an endeavor to attain something that's difficult to attain, there will be suffering. It doesn't necessarily mean that suffering itself has meaning. It's just that if you try to live a life of meaning, you will suffer. So there's like a fallacy that we can fall into.
That's really good.
It's kind of a...
If you were to explain that to infant humans, how would you say that again? Because that's really good, man.
If you're going to do something that is to infant humans, if you want something and you're gonna work hard and you're gonna try to get the thing that's difficult to get, that's worth having, you will experience suffering, and that suffering will have meaning in that context. It doesn't mean that suffering itself has meaning. They're two distinct states.
Suffering is a byproduct of living a life with purpose.
Yes.
It's not that suffering by itself has purpose.
Correct. That's it. Yeah.
So now, people just want to suffer because they're already rewarded in every way without even working for it or suffering for it in any way. So the only thing missing in a lot of these people's lives are a drive, a path, a purpose,
Yes.
a meaning. So the only thing that they can lead to is themselves manifesting some sort of suffering in one way or another. And it can actually be real suffering. They'll purposely get into, like, humans get with other humans, and sometimes they punch each other, they live with each other.
Yes.
And then they start screaming, and they're supposed to love or something.
Yes. The idea is that they're supposed to be loving and supporting and nurturing each other, but instead they begin to attack one another because of this unconsciousness and the tumbling back into the darkness of history, the tumbling back into the gravity of our evolutionary past. It takes real discipline not to do that. And that particular context of intimacy between two humans seems to be very provocative of the evolutionary past. One of those scenarios that's very provocative. If we get tribal, that's very provocative. If we talk sexual union, that's very provocative. Anything that's to do with power systems, again, it's very provocative of the monkey mind, of the evolutionary past. It's hard not to respond from our evolutionary past when the stakes are high and the rewards are great.
Okay, so you sent Corona the report?
I did.
Is that why we got extended and we have to go back, or we went back?
That's why we will, and we have gone back for our little 3-week extension, yes.
During the worst time of modern human history.
It's just more passive aggression. She wants us to come back with a dimmer view of humanity. They really want to write humanity off at this point.
The reason why I'm bringing this up, we're talking about primitive human impulses and survival. This is the most primitive that I have seen the humans in modern technological development that I have ever seen.
Yes.
You would think with all of these resources and all of the technological advancements, you would think that they would move past these impulses. We got sent. As much as I love Prague, just during a time where they're locking everything down again, and the whole world's locking down again. We can't do anything. I got a PlayStation 4. That's fun. Why did she do that?
Bait. Humans, the whole of humanity is being baited to perform at their worst so that somebody can say, look at them, they've been given everything, they have food, they have commodities, they have all this technology, look what they do with it. They just wank themselves to death and then kill each other. It's bait, and we're being baited into saying, this is a wasted endeavor, this project has gone awry, write it off.
We're being punished, aren't we?
It feels very much that way, yes.
So from what I am seeing right now in this time period is the humans have completely reverted back to their survival instincts with the implementation of social media and technology. They're acting like monkeys.
Yes.
But everything's accelerated because they can say things directly to each other in a millisecond.
Yes, they have this new phrase, the echo chamber. So people are living inside of echo chambers, and the louder you shout inside of an echo chamber, the louder everything seems to be because it's reverberating back to you off the walls.
When I go on social media now, before, as like superficial and, silly, seeing duck lips and giant body parts disproportionate to other body parts, at least it was innocent-ish. They're calling for war indirectly with everything that they post and write. They're just screaming their team as loud as they can, whether it be about something that they're wearing, how they look, their claimings aside, and everything is fragmenting as if it was the Dark Ages, the primitive, archaic times when everybody was a Neanderthal. It's back to banging bone marrow on top of each other's heads if you're, look a little different from the next person. But now this is all happening in some sort of metaphysical digital space.
Yeah, polarization seems to be the end result of an ungoverned technology that has no controls on it, and it's only there to make profit. I'm not absolving them of guilt, but if you just say you set up, the way people act will depend on the rules of the game. So if we say the rules of the game are the only thing that counts is profit, then the only thing that counts in the social media space is as many eyeballs on the screen as possible for as long as possible. If you set up the game that way, how long does it take for the people who run the social media platforms to realize that what keeps eyeballs on screens longer is not love, is not reason, is not philosophy, it's drama, it's chaos, it's horror, it's indignation and anger. These things are far more addictive and more instantly gratifying to the worst parts of the human animal. So if you just want eyeballs on screen, if we're running a social media platform, we should prioritize content that induces righteous indignation, feelings of jealousy and rage.
There was a time in human history that they did this just without the LCD screens.
Right.
This was a Roman Coliseum, right? They just got a bunch of people in this giant stadium, and then they like horse carriages, right?
That's right, yeah.
Which is like...
Yeah, they would do torches. They would have people from different minority religious groups being eaten alive by wild animals that they brought in cages from Africa. They would perform mutilations and miniature battles even, and just watch people being killed. But they did that explicitly. The monkeys with the most coconuts at the top of the pile did that because they feared the masses below them. So they called it bread and circuses. So they would freely give people bread, which is a cheap source of calories, and circuses, the spectacle, the violent, sexual, pornographic, obscene spectacle, to placate them, to keep them in line.
This is proven?
Oh, no, they were open about it. The phrase is, my Latin is not so good, pane et circum, bread and circuses. That's a mode of rule from Roman times. Give the people bread and circuses so they don't revolt. Because why should... You're talking about tens of thousands of people. Why should they let me sit at the top of this pile of coconuts when they can just rise up and steal the coconuts from me? Distract them, placate them, appeal to their base instincts. Any religious group or spiritual group that came out and said, hey, we don't have to live like this. We can love each other. We don't need all this stuff. We just need space and time and the pleasure of each other's company, and to sit around the campfire at night telling stories and singing songs, dancing and farting. They would capture them and torture them to death publicly.
Why is it that when you're describing this, I feel like this is the timeline that we're in right now in our flesh bodies within the earth realm? Right now, it feels like we are, or us in the flesh vehicles, when we're transported there, humans are collectively in what you would say as the digital coliseum. We are fed the bread. There's this thing called Vault. And I got a promo code. It was like PRXO or something like that.
Sweet.
Yeah, and you can like get food directly to your house. Like,
wow.
So it's like feed everybody bread, right? So we're stuck in these seats, and we have the bread, and then we have the spectacle, except it's just in a rectangle, a glowing rectangle.
Yeah, they bring the Coliseum to you. You don't have to go to the Coliseum now.
Yeah, the Coliseum is in our house, and we can watch the worst of humanity from there. And on top of that, didn't before they like would have like, I don't know, from the movie depictions, they would hold like the turkey legs, and be like, off with his head, off with his head.
They would scream for people to be murdered. They would call for the worst things to be done, and throughout, beyond Rome and beyond, past forward in history, really brutal executions. They would announce what they would do to the person before killing them, and these would draw the largest crowds possible. If there was terrible torture and mutilation first, people would show up. They'd bring the kids. They'd bring some food. They'd hang out. They'd get the front row seats just so they can hear every scream and bone crunch.
That's the comment section of every social media platform now. You have
listening
people-
for the scream and the bone crunch.
You have everybody from all different ages and backgrounds from all over the world screaming righteously about the off with their head with the next individual and the next thing and the next circumstance, the next situation. Coliseum is pay-per-view within our flats now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you know, during that time, you have the spectacle of the Coliseum would last maybe a few hours. This is 24/7.
Yeah, why let the people out of the Coliseum when they're in the Coliseum, you can monetize and tax them as they're watching it. You can actually draw more coconuts from them as they're watching it. Don't let it stop. May it go on forevermore. May it go on into infinity, because you want your control to be infinite.
Coffee's pretty good on the tongue. It's weird. The tongue thing is still weird. So,
A useful implement, though.
very useful for many things. And this is a lot to take in because I'm starting to see this. I'm usually covering like makeup influencers and Kim Kardashian and stuff like that. So
They're also gladiators in the Colosseum in a certain sense, though, right?
yeah, the Queen, King. So bear with me. So perhaps this is exactly what we have gained intel on the fact that everything is reverting back to primitive human impulse and violence, except this time it's accelerated exponentially with the use of digital media, social media, computers, and technology, where we are literally watching these Coliseum battles 24/7, and we actually don't really catch a break. Nowadays, I've actually seen some people leave the Coliseum on purpose. But generally, the masses are still completely, almost glued to their seat. They purposely are strapping themselves down even before they go to bed or even in the morning. I definitely was responsible for that during my time on Earth. You just, let's see what's happening in the Coliseum. First thing you do. Or maybe before, as awful as it was, they still had to get up and get fruits for their merchant business and whatever else. But nowadays we can see what's happening and who got slaughtered right as you open your eyes, right in the morning to right when you close your eyes to transcend to the dream world.
You reach for the Colosseum portal and gaze into that little black screen just to see who was tortured to death yesterday or mauled by a lion. Yes, absolutely.
So that means if a human being is perpetually in a state of watching other humans violently decapitate and circumcise each other, then every single day of their lives, they project this reality onto everyday life, meaning that they're going to be paranoid and think that the world is the most vicious and dangerous place to ever exist than ever.
So there's a few things to this. One is the population explosion. So there's a huge number of humans now, vastly more than there was in Roman times. So there's a lot more people to govern and a lot more people to power the Colosseum. So it's become incredibly powerful. Another thing is that people will do what everybody else is doing. This has been proven time and again in psychology experiments. If everybody's going to the Colosseum and you don't, you're a weirdo. You're a real weirdo. When you mentioned before about living with more testosterone, in order to choose to live with more testosterone, you went a route of that was different to mine. But in order to live as a testosterone guy, I had to be an outsider. I was practically homeless. I was living like a vagabond. To integrate, you have to sort of like show, no, I'm not a testosterone guy, or you live outside of the tribe. So we are being asked to cut off essential parts of ourselves. And the other thing is, as you've just said, yeah, it's a brainwashing protocol. If you're in the Colosseum every day, where the worst things imaginable are being done in a very tight space amongst a minority of humans, but you're staring into that magic mirror every day, you'll come to see the whole world in that respect, absolutely. Many people who see this stuff, even as they're enjoying it, they're being traumatized by it. They don't realize. They think, oh, this is pleasurable. Actually, you're being traumatized because there are parts of the human flesh suit that can't distinguish between real reality and simulated reality yet. It's one of the weaknesses. It's one of the factors. We don't know that that's just a show. We think that's real. You see somebody who's very wealthy, the makeup influencers, the Kim Kardashians, your brain starts going, oh, she's my neighbor. What makes her your neighbor? I see her every day. So she's in my tribe. So I'm competing with this multi-millionaire, possibly billionaire, and I feel lower than her. the thing with the violence and the attacking and the outrage and everything, you start to think, no, this is happening on my doorstep. It isn't. But the human entity can't distinguish between real reality and reality that's vividly imagined.
They have a really strange fascination with these simulated realities in the form of what they call movies and film. They basically they'll write lines like what you should say during this time and be sad. You're like, I'm sad, and then like, be angry. I'm angry. You know. So then they do this for like 2 hours. People just sit there and watch the simulated reality, and they get really absorbed in it, and they think it's real, and it actually simulates these similar emotions while you're watching it. When I was when I manifested in my flesh suit, I did like movies. I didn't spend too much time on them, but I think one of the reasons was, first of all, I could not focus at all. Second of all, a lot of it was just really emotionally too intense for my flesh vehicle to process, and I thought maybe I just had more sensitive flesh vehicle. Maybe that's why. Then I started really thinking about, okay, so obviously things were really, really violent back in the Neanderthals or pre-Anunnaki integration. So a lot of these humans would only see something traumatizing, such as their fellow brother caveman getting slaughtered by a lion maybe once every 3 years.
Or less, yeah.
Or even less. They would rarely maybe even see physical conflict, you know, and even above that, within the more advanced periods of time, it wasn't coliseum every single day.
No.
There were grand spectacles every once in a while. But
most people would have lived their lives in those times with zero grand spectacle and zero...
boring.
Yeah, fairly boring life. Where you're fighting to survive. That's it.
How long have humans just been living in really boring, uneventful lives with no visions of trauma at all?
The overwhelming majority of human history would have just been birdsong.
That's it. They're just sitting around on a campfire. For some reason, I see campfires all over the place now, and like things like that. And things are just, I guess, more peaceful. And it's only once in a very, very long time where there is a violent image that just manifests, like a lion actually does break into the log cabin and then slaughters the family. We are allowed now access to any imagery at any time, consistently and frequently. The human brain before was maybe only able to process 3 traumatic incidences max way back when, before you really started like messing yourself up.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you got like 16-year-old teenage boys just watching gore and slaughterhouse films way more than any human 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
In 1 hour, a teenage boy can see more murder, more inappropriate, nasty stuff than any human for their entire lives before.
Yes. Yeah. There's been it's been speculated that if you compare the way we live now to the average human, say in medieval England, we will see more information, just raw information and data in one day than they would have seen in a lifetime.
Yes.
There's just so much stimuli that the human entity is being asked to process right now. And if you get it wrong, you drop off the social hierarchy, you're done. You have to not just process it, you have to be good at it.
Yeah.
You have to compete at processing all the stimuli and the data.
So these humans, dog, this is what they're expecting right now. This is what they're expecting. Our brains to catch up with the exponential growth of technology that just went through the fucking roof.
Yeah.
Like, our brain hasn't evolved at all.
Yep.
Technology went from a computer the size of a warehouse to one that fits in our pocket.
That can do more than what the warehouse computer could do.
The ones that can fit up your rectum can do 10 times more, you know? And our brains haven't changed at all, right?
Hormonal system, the brain, the flight-fight response hasn't changed one iota.
So now we're watching 1,000 traumatic images per second, maybe not per second, like an hour. We can get a bunch of information in this trauma machine. A trauma mirror is what I think these things are. They're just watching like 300 times the amount of trauma through actual videos, photos, while looking at images of people that are better looking and smarter and more intelligent and traumatic, because then it makes you feel bad about yourself. Then you're reading all this information about everything that's happening in Uganda to Sweden to the place that you're in right now. The government's like putting lockdowns and this. The information's conflicting each other, and you watch a cat video for 3 seconds on top of that, and then you go and watch a tutorial on how to play guitar that you'll give up in 5 minutes and doing. Then you watch a political video from a side that you don't even care about to a random video. And then these people expect you to say everything correctly right at that very moment. And if you accidentally say something inappropriate, they want you off the face of the earth. And you have to be the perfect morally righteous character and completely omit any type of moral corruption on accident.
Correct. Set up to fail, man. It's set up to fail. You can't win. This thing of moral righteousness, there's never been a time in human history where the orthodoxy is so ill-defined. If you lived through communism, you would have been told, this is what you must say, this is what you must think, and even then they would still set you up to fail and you still get it wrong, even if you were completely virtuous. But at least you were told the rules. We're not even told the rules. And when we are told the rules, they shift daily, hourly. We all are failing the orthodoxy because we're humans. You can't win in this orthodoxy. It's totally inhuman. In Catholic times, in the times of the Spanish Inquisition, in the Crusades and whatever, there was a rule book. Yes, it would change and sometimes you could do, but we're not being given a rule book. There's no rule book. You're just wrong. You're just wrong. Just be ashamed and say nothing.
Yeah. Hey, don't tell anybody. Don't tell Corona. I hopped in the time accelerator a bit. Dude, this is this movie of humanity. I just needed to get to the fucking point. I can't focus, and I wanted to see how what would happen in a few years. So these humans, right? If you describe someone as as opposed to ooh,
use English, please.
So okay, so they came up with some words, and you would. So for example, I would call you a ooh, but you were actually you wanted to be called right, and I accidentally called you the other thing. I would be immediately transmuted and turn into fucking and disintegrated
Dust.
I would be dust. I'll be back to atoms, man. They got ray guns now, and then I might have got shot up a little bit in that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm okay. Like it was just you know, but
sting a little.
It'll sting a little bit, but and ooh is something that there was apparently really big enough to entirely wipe somebody off.
Yes, I think once you've gotten to that stage of hysteria, there can't really be a stage beyond that. You've sort of hit peak hysteria. So if you make the wrong mouth noise or rectum noise at the wrong time, you could be turned into dust. These are high stakes because it's easy to make the wrong mouth noise.
I went even further. They got fucking flatulence restrictions, man. They got flatulence regulations, dude.
Right.
So like, okay, no more silent but deadly, right?
That's not a thing anymore.
No, you have to make a noise every time.
Okay.
So but you have to do it right at the right tone.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
And if it's the wrong octave of.
Yes. So you could actually. You can lose your job in the Intergalactic Federation at one point in human history.
Right.
You can your wife and husband and brother simultaneously will disown you. Your pets won't even like you anymore.
Wow.
If you went,
that's rough.
Yeah. The thing is, like, you have to make it like straight to the point, like
right.
Just
a quick.
Yeah.
And that's the tone.
Yeah. If it's a little higher.
So is gulag. Or disintegration.
And if you do that, you will get sent to the digital gulag.
Hard times, man. Hard times.
But that's how crazy things have been getting, because they couldn't restrict any more mouth noises. They had to go somewhere else.
They'd restricted all the mouth noises, and then they went to rectum noises.
Because at some point, you literally make any mouth noise, and they're like, "That's offensive. You're being insensitive. Don't say anything." So then after that, they ran out of things to restrict. So the next best thing was
So they ran out of things to restrict, but their lust for restriction and censorship wasn't satiated yet.
It's not that they wanted things to be censored. They liked the act of censoring things.
Right.
It felt good to say, no, you can't do that.
It's powerful to censor somebody. You feel a little moment of, oh, that feels good.
And then what happens when people are just like, fuck it, I'm not saying anything anymore. They're like, well, I can't exercise my power anymore. What do I do? It can't be, it has to be.
I heard there was scenarios where even if you chose silence, that was considered a violence.
Silence is violence was a thing.
Right. So you're in a double-bind catch-22 sine qua non where you literally cannot do right for doing wrong. Despair is the only end result of that.
Yeah, and I was like, well, if I can't do anything, I might as well fart. But now they're restricting that too.
Right. Even farting. My God. Monsters.
So, that was one of my favorite hobbies, man.
Oh. It's a truly cruel thing to cause you to not fart.
It was the last bastion of creative expression.
And they took it away from me. Those bastards.
They took music. They took comedy. They took speech. But they ain't taking my farts.
Not until you prize it from my cold, dead butt cheeks.
They were censoring everything. You know that platform we were on for a while? Mm-hmm. That shit, they destroyed themselves because they censored everything.
Including their own selves.
Yeah.
Like, we have committed the sin against the orthodoxy.
The same employees, the creators on YouTube, they just like, no, you can't do any of that. And then they just drove all of their employees off the platform. They disintegrated and they tried to get them all back, but it was too late. Then you have all these other platforms. You know that Joe Rogan human? Mm-hmm. He's pretty cool. I think he's all right.
I love his shiny dome.
Yeah. It's very good. And he's like into like a red toaster now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
As a punishment, or?
I think he stole one of our batteries from the flip ship. And he just kind of like hid him there.
Sounds like it.
Well, just don't tell Corona.
Okay.
So anyways, like he just got a bunch of coconuts for signing up with this other platform, Spotify.
I heard he had a pile of coconuts that reached to the sky.
It was a lot of coconuts, man. And then apparently what I think is that YouTube was really censoring him, so he moved to this other one to speak more. But then now, that new platform, Spotify, is removing podcasts and censoring him, and then all these employees are getting really, really angry with him, and they're fighting with the boss now to remove him off the platform, and like...
It's a strange thing, isn't it, when you have these cycles where humans collectively come together and get up in arms and fight freedom. They don't fight for freedom, they fight against freedom. But it's a little short-sighted philosophically, because if you're fighting against freedom, how long before that fight against freedom comes back around to you? It always does. In every manifestation of any totalitarianistic system, it's a snake that eats its own tail or disappears up its own bumhole, whichever orifice you prefer. Because if you're restricting and censoring people, eventually you must also be restricted and censored because you are also a person. So the people who take over and say these are the dissidents, the group that falls into the dissident class doesn't shrink. It seems to grow and grow and grow until it starts to reach our shores. And then we slowly, one by one, we fall into the dissident class and our own comrades are the ones hammering us to death.
I played with this idea. I've been doing a lot of shit beneath regulations, man. Just don't tell anybody, please. So, this type of simulator, right? Yeah, no. This simulator that I have, it's a human simulator. It's not an actual multiverse on its own. But I played with the idea, for example, I ran the simulation where you basically had a bunch of younger humans without any wrinkles at all. And they thought that wrinkleless humans were superior.
Oh, interesting.
Right? And they got so power hungry that was just kind of like, you know what? Anybody with wrinkles need to be wiped off. They're terrible, morally corrupt people. They're wrinkle-phobic.
Okay.
Yeah, they're wrinkle-phobic? Is that the right, correct?
Yeah, they would be wrinkle-phobic, yes.
Yes. And then they would call all of the wrinkled people smooth-phobic.
Ah.
Right?
Okay.
So they would shame them and do all these things. But turns out that it was inevitable from the restrictions that the smooth skins would basically impose came back around because wrinkles are inevitable.
Damn.
They grew up,
Yeah.
and then they started gaining wrinkles, and they fought for the laws in order to disintegrate wrinkled people. So these younger people that were smooth skinned and they thought they would never get the wrinkles, they're like, fuck the wrinkled people. These wrinkled people are terrible. The wrinkles are, we need to remove them all. Step in the particle transponder, you're going to get disintegrated immediately. So they fought for these laws. 5 years later, these same people got a little eye wrinkle here, maybe a bit of that. Boom, they were the first to go.
So they end up in the execution camps that they themselves built, being subjected to the same laws that they wrote into being.
They fought for the same laws that ended up killing them.
That's actually a sort of a nice way of saying what humans usually do. They usually fight for the laws that end up destroying them in a cyclical way over time, over the centuries. What's our prescriptive solution? She didn't like the first report, man. She wasn't happy with it. She knew I was bluffing.
That's why we're stuck in Prague under lockdown. I mean, I will say, though, this is the best place to be under lockdown. Anywhere else in the world right now would be a fucking nightmare.
Oh, it's a very charming place.
It's a beautiful place, man. What is the prescription? Well, that last report got us sent here under lockdown in the worst times of modern human history, almost. Does she want to hear something negative or positive? Like, what is she looking? What does she tell you?
What she wants me to say is write them off. It's useless. They're all going into the descendant realm. The ascendant realm is never going to be a thing that happens. Everybody in the split goes descendant, and there's no help.
Are we being delusional by thinking the best of these creatures?
Possibly, but let's do it anyway. Maybe a little delusion is not the worst thing in the world. Maybe delusion would be that imaginary space in which we permit ourselves to create something new.
Hope?
Hope. Some sort of optimism for its own sake.
Do you think that human wiring just kind of stuck with us after a while? This is very exclusive to the humans. They're very hopeful, even in the worst possible times. They'll somehow delude themselves to think that everything's worth something in purpose.
So, if we can tap that hope and attach it to something practical, maybe less usage of the social medias, maybe less of that newscasting, 24/7 coliseum scenario, maybe not totally get rid of it, because we can't ask too much, but less, like a lot less. More contact with other humans, dancing, creative expression. Did we have anything else?
What if we put that within the social media, or tried to?
Oh, create like a new virus that could become contagious, where people say, okay, I don't want to suffer anymore. I don't want other people to suffer anymore. Let's do this new thing and let it spread like that. Like an antibiotic into the system, maybe a counter-virus.
Yeah, an antivirus. Using the same vehicle, but just in a different way.
Okay, maybe she would, I don't know. I mean, I got to give her something. I'm not giving her the write it off scenario. So I'll try and bluff my way with that this time. You know, we're going to create an antibiotic to this ideological infection. We're going to get people calmer, saner, more rational, trusting each other, arguing in good faith instead of bad faith, not just trying to win for their stupid tribal team all the time, like it's a game of push the ball.
I believe that can happen, but we might have to let things play out in the meantime. It might be too early to try to implement that, and maybe something really does have to explode for a bit.
In order to generate the neuroplasticity to accept huge change, let the crisis play out a little longer.
I think so. It's the only way they'll learn. It's the hard way.
You are a stern daddy indeed, but you might be right. But at least we can appeal to her pessimistic, apocalyptic evil by saying, let them suffer more, but then when they've suffered, then they'll be ready to try a new way. And this could be the new way. It's not that hard. It appeals to their intrinsic human nature, just the better elements of their nature, rather than the lower, worse elements of their nature.
Let them suffer enough until they can't take it anymore, and let them figure out from there how to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll type it up, but you have to sign it off.
Can you give it to her?
If I have to. I'll just close my eyes and get the job
I was going to close my eyes too.
I'll give it to her. You don't have to this time.
All right.
All right.